Is there a path between impeaching Trump and doing nothing? That debate, as you probably know, has been riling up Democrats in Congress as well as around the country ever since the Mueller report came out, and especially since he spoke. Well, now, as the week begins, we are seeing the outlines of an apparent middle road. Another House chairman driving towards a vote to hold Attorney General Bill Barr in contempt. This is new and would be the second committee vote to do so and tee up a potential floor vote. While, at the same time, Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler formally convening a series of obstruction hearings on President Trump's, quote, alleged crimes, probing Trump's most overt acts of obstruction outlined in the Mueller report, and considering targeted legislative oversight and constitutional remedies in response to Mueller's findings. So let's stop right here and just take a look at what's happening. What is Nadler saying? He's making this move as other House members who call for impeachment have been growing their ranks. It's now up to 58 members from just 50 when we were talking about this last week. So these hearings may just be for fact-finding and to inform legislation, but they do also hold out the prospect of more because of what he's saying. In fact, let's put that announcement back up. Okay, right here where Chairman Nadler refers to constitutional remedies. That is an important set of two words because it doesn't mean legislation. Constitutional remedies is a diplomatic reference to, yes, impeachment. It is the Constitution's remedy and process other than the criminal justice system that accuses the president of wrongdoing. Now, if that language sounds a little familiar, did you hear like a little echo? It may be because the former special counsel used that exact language when he gave his resignation address imploring Congress to read the report and do its job.
The opinion says that the Constitution requires a process other than the criminal justice system to formally accuse a sitting president of wrongdoing.
Nadler's hearing may not have some Trump aides involved because, as you know, they're defying subpoenas. But the Democrats are doing other things to try to get this going. For example, they have announced today they're going to have the Watergate star witness John Dean to testify as one of the experts. He certainly knows his way around these issues, along with former federal prosecutors who say they will conclude what Mueller would not, that they have looked at the evidence as prosecutors and they think there is criminal obstruction of justice. And there may be some kind of tiny crack in the Democratic leadership as well, because while Pelosi and her deputy Steny Hoyer are not for impeachment, their deputy, Majority Whip Jim Clyburn, who's also the most senior ranking minority in the House or Senate, he is now, all of a sudden, he is saying impeachment proceedings will begin at some point.
You think that the president will be impeached, or at least proceedings will begin in the House at some point, but just not right now?
Yes, exactly what I feel. I think we've already begun it.
That's new. Now, is that a new plan teeing up an actual road to impeachment proceedings, or is it, and you have to always hold out the alternatives when you're dealing with politicians, is it some kind of political speak for later, which may ultimately turn into never? Now, Clyburn is not on the actual impeachment caucus list yet. That's important to note for context. As I mentioned, you got 57 Democrats and 1 Republican, and now it is also including some moderates, like Congressman Tim Ryan. You may recall him. He's challenged Pelosi from the center right for leader, and he says that he has now changed to backing impeachment explicitly because of Mueller's new statement.
Given me this amazing opportunity.
Have read the Mueller report, and I believe he obstructed on multiple occasions. We have a responsibility. I take no joy in this at all, but I have a duty and a responsibility, and that duty and responsibility has led me to think that we have to do this.
I'm joined now by Congressman John Yarmuth and former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi to get into it. Congressman, has the impeachment process effectively begun under another name, or are your colleagues not there yet?
Well, I think it has, Ari, and I've said this for months now, that what the Judiciary Committee is doing right now and what actually the Oversight Committee is assisting with are exactly the things you would do when you would be initiating an investigation prior to impeachment, whether you call it an impeachment inquiry or just an investigation. Looking for the same type of information, whether or not, for instance, the president and on how many occasions violated the Emoluments Clause, how many foreign entanglements are there, whether it's agreements, not just with Russia, but with Saudi Arabia and possibly other countries. So these are things that the Congress has been trying to get at, will continue to try and get at. And I think this is what Speaker Pelosi means when she said you have to have a compelling case. Because if you just rely on obstruction of justice, there are those, because of the narrative that Attorney General Barr has been able to create, there are those who aren't going to be convinced.
And you you support impeaching President Trump?
I do. I actually co-sponsored an impeachment resolution in the last Congress.
And so let me ask you this about your party, given that framework for our viewers. If that's a good idea, why are the leaders of the Democratic Party afraid to call for it? Why does it have to be impeachment by another name, in your view?
Well, I don't think it will end up being impeachment by another name. I agree totally with Jim Clyburn that once these investigations have run their course over the next couple of months, we'll have the entire case that we would then draft articles of impeachment, which then the Judiciary Committee would hold hearings on.
Let me get your view on some other reporting that we're hearing, because we always like to go to the source. Chairman Nadler reportedly privately pushing Pelosi for impeachment, telling Pelosi let him begin an inquiry, an investigation on what, if any, articles they would draft to vote on. Does that sound accurate to you?
I don't have any firsthand knowledge of that, but it does sound accurate to me. And let me say this.
Interesting. So the idea that we have Pelosi out here with her reasons, but the chairs pushing her privately, respectfully, but trying to get her closer to an impeachment probe, to you, that reads as right tonight.
I think that sounds right. And, the one reason I think that is because Speaker Pelosi has never said a word to me or to anybody else that I know who has come out for impeachment to cool it, calm it down, cool it, hold your powder. She's never made any of those comments.
Well, but she tries to get you all away from using the I word, doesn't she? I mean, that's where we started tonight.
Right. I think she doesn't want the country to have the focus on the House be on impeachment, that she'd rather have people focus on the legislative agenda that we are trying to implement, and much of which we've passed already. So I understand where she's going. I fully agree with her strategy. But I think impeachment is inevitable. I always have. And I think the American people, if we don't impeach or bring proceedings against this president, then impeachment means nothing.
Sir, you just doubled down on your I word. You went from impeachment to inevitable. That's farther than we've heard from others. Stay with me. Gene, as a prosecutor, what do you think hearing all this?
It's music to my ears. A rose by any other name still smells as sweet. And you can call it impeachment. You can call it an investigation. You can call it anything you want. But I agree with the congressman. We have now started the process of removing the President of the United States.
Take a listen to Speaker Pelosi and how she was received on the point you raised, which is, are we on that road or not, and what does her party want? This was at a very big California gathering that a lot of politicians spoke at. Take a look.
The president's campaign welcomed Russian interference in the election, and the report lays out 11 instances of possible obstruction of justice by the President of the United States. As I told you, this was like coming home for me.
You know, Gene,
yes.
It is like coming home, but obviously coming home to a crowd that wants her to be somewhere else than she is at this moment.
Right. Well, Ari, I'm from Virginia, and there are two congressional districts, the 7th with Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, and the 2nd Congressional District with Elaine Luria. I know both of them, and they're in tough districts. They won by a small margin. So Speaker Pelosi, who I think is absolutely brilliant, she understands that there are some members of Congress that can't use that I word as aggressively as other people, with the utmost respect to the congressman, because we have to go through this thoughtfully and deliberately, patience and time. But at the end of the day, whether it's 2 months or into next year, I think we'll be at the point where people will have read the Mueller report, and will conclude that he needs to be removed.
You said or next year. I mean, this is the issue, Congressman, because I can't see the future. I'm not in these private meetings you're in with your colleagues, but I do have a calendar. And the Iowa caucus and the other primaries begin in the in the start of next year, and it's hard to imagine if your party doesn't move by the end of summer or early fall, that then the trigger would be right in the middle of all that. And part of what you may need as well is this question of who else is going to be a compliant witness as opposed to those who are in defiance. It would stand to reason that Bob Mueller, if he got a subpoena, would testify in public. I don't think he's the type to defy, although he made his views, his preference clear. Here was your colleague, Congressman Schiff, on what you should do about it. Take a look.
I hope that Bob Mueller will understand, as painful as it may be and as much as it may subject him to further abuse by the White House, he has a final duty here to perform, like any other witness.
And if he doesn't subpoena?
Well, it will be my recommendation, yes.
Do you agree?
I agree totally with Adam. We have to have Bob Mueller testify. We have to have him go through some of the most important points that he made in the report. For instance, on the issue of collusion, he didn't mention in his statement the other day that he said evidence was destroyed, documents were overseas they couldn't get, witnesses took the Fifth Amendment, some witnesses lied. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why they couldn't come up with a convincing case of conspiracy. So I think that's the kind of valuable testimony that Bob Mueller would give that he didn't give the other day.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.